Thank you, and welcome everyone to the Spectra7 Microsystems presentation at LD Micro. Good to have you all here this afternoon. Let me start by introducing all of you to Spectra7, since I know there are a number of people in the audience that may not be familiar with Spectra7. I know there are a few familiar faces as well. Spectra7 is a Silicon Valley-based high-performance analog chip company. We are the leader in a very important emerging category of high-speed connectivity. So our electronics enables systems to interconnect at very high speeds and also at low cost and low power over ubiquitous copper interconnects. Moving along, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the key statistics of the company. The company is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, not the TSV, the ventures, but the big board, TSX. As of last Friday, our market cap was about a little over 23 million Canadian, with the convertible bond added back to it. The enterprise value is north of 35 Canadian. Trailing 12 months revenues were just under $9 million in US, and margins, a real indicator of the value of the business and its solutions to our customers, are pretty high, sitting at about 58% over the prior 4 quarters. Insider ownership is right around 5% of our total shares outstanding, that being 172 million shares. So that's a very quick intro to the company. I'm very proud of the leadership team. As you would see on the slide there, it's a team of tremendous pedigree that has run all kinds of businesses from small to large corporations. Particularly new to the team are 3 key executives. Darren Ma, our CFO, who is seated in the front here. Put your hand up, Darren. Darren joined me 6 months ago and has a great deal of industry experience, having started out at Intel Corporation, subsequently Semtech, GigPeak, which was also known as Gig Optics prior. So Darren brings a tremendous amount of industry experience, and particularly in this domain of high-speed interconnects from GigPeak. Jerry Hamilton runs our worldwide sales organization, joined me from previously at Mindspeed, and Anthony Inns joined me from Marvell to run manufacturing operations. The rest of the gentlemen you see on the slide are founding team members. Dr. Andrew Kim, our Chief Technical Officer, tremendous experience in the area of signal processing. John Mitchell, our Chief Marketing Officer, who knows interconnect inside out, knows technology, knows the customers, is highly respected throughout the industry. And Ibrahim Abu Nasra, who leads our data center initiative, previously with Molex Corporation. A very strong team, great pedigree, really focused on execution going forward. So at a high level, let me recap the investment highlights for Spectra7. First of all, we're a small company, yes, but we are focused on some very large, high-growth markets that delivers superior returns to our shareholders, both in terms of revenue growth, but earnings growth over time, that are fueling continued business momentum. Our primary market, which I'll talk to quite a bit here in a couple of slides, is really focused on cloud infrastructure, also known as data centers, and we'll talk to that in a minute. Also, the blockchain infrastructure is a major kicker, if you will, for the data center. So it's a big phenomenon for us. It's driving a lot of traffic over these same data centers that are adopting Spectra7 technology. And obviously, the core business at Spectra7, which we're known for, is connecting virtual reality or VR head-mounted displays to the compute host. So if you were to go to the store, for instance, a Best Buy, or check on Amazon, a VR device, typically the cable that connects the VR head-mounted display back to a host, a laptop, or a desktop, whatever it may be, is enabled by Spectra7. And we'll talk to that as well. Darren and I have been focused on operational efficiency in the company, and in fact announced that in Q1 of this year, we took operating costs down 16%. We expect to keep the lid on OpEx and hopefully over time drive OpEx down and accrete to the bottom line. So a little more on the business itself. I mentioned very quickly this category of active copper cable. At a high level, there's sort of 3 ways to connect devices and systems. One is wireless, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4G, and so forth. Another one is optical interconnect over optical fibers. And traditionally, connectivity has been established over the 3rd category, which is copper. Very simple copper cabling. Has been around about 130 years or so since the invention of the telephone. Copper cabling has many shortcomings. It has attenuation, signal loss, other electrical characteristics that have historically prevented copper from delivering high data rates, particularly over a long distance. This is why people adopted optical fiber many, many years ago. What Spectra7 is all about is really bringing some highly patented and unique technology to the copper cable medium that allows copper cables to carry much higher data rate traffic over a longer distance, over a thinner, very light copper gauge. Okay? That's what we're all about. Our IP is protected by 53 issued patents in the U.S. as well as overseas, and added to that, of course, an inordinate, extensive amount of know-how in this universe of interconnect, particularly over copper. We're single-sourced with all our customers, and we enjoy high gross margins, typically, as you heard, 58 to 60%. Okay? At the bottom of the slide, you see a sampling of our key customers are today in volume production with Spectra7. Includes some notables like Facebook, Oculus in the VR space, HP, Dell, Lenovo, at Samsung, and Foxconn as well in the data center space. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of all the Tier 1 customers we have, just a sampling of the ones that we're particularly proud of that are in the market today, enabled by Spectra7 active copper cable technology. So turning to our markets, and let me recap those for you briefly. Our number one focus as a company today and going forward is the data center / blockchain infrastructure. We continue to serve the VR market. We expect to maintain a dominant market share in VR, but really the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for Spectra7 is in the data center. This is a very large market, expected to be over $4 billion in 2019, and growing at a roughly 60% compounded annual growth rate, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. It's driven by a number of very important infrastructure factors, such as cloud, obviously cloud infrastructure, cryptocurrency, and increasing blockchain processing, a phenomena that drives an enormous amount of traffic at high data rates over the data center. Again, a critical demand driver for Spectra7 electronics. In the AR, augmented, in other words, as well as mixed reality space, we have a really strong position today. We scored last year the Microsoft Windows 10 device, and along with that, all the PC OEMs who support that Windows 10 device, names such as HP, Dell, Lenovo, many, many others. We're in production in that platform and hope to continue to be in production with the platform in future generations of it as well. And of course, VR. The core virtual reality market is the one that Spectra7 first penetrated some 4 or 5 years ago, with the marquee design win being Oculus, which of course is now part of Facebook. And we continue to enjoy a dominant position in the VR market. And I'll talk to those markets in order that you see here. So I'll talk first to the data center and blockchain opportunity for us, and then turn to the VR MR later in the presentation. So starting with the data center market, what we like about this is that this is a very large, existing, non-speculative opportunity for Spectra7. But also, it's a high-margin opportunity for us. Unlike, say, consumer markets where gross margins are typically in a, call it 45, 50% kind of range, in the data center you can enjoy gross margins north of 60%, maybe even pushing 70%. That's 70. The interconnect piece of this, and this is just to define it for you as the picture would suggest, it's all the cabling in the back of these racks, right? If you've seen pictures of data centers, even particularly the large hyperscale data centers, you would realize that the cabling required to interconnect servers to each other and to switches is just extraordinary. It's a huge opportunity for Spectra7. And this year is expected to be around $3 billion. Okay, again, $3 billion is the TAM size this year, and expected to continue growing at almost 60%. Okay, almost 60% growth opportunity, and once again, at high gross margins. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us. The market is large, it's existing, it's non-speculative, and our technology fits it perfectly with a very unique and disruptive value proposition, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is just a snapshot of one of several important value propositions that we bring to the data center. As many of you are aware, power dissipation is a very big-ticket item for these large hyperscaler data centers. Typically, operators, names like Google, Amazon, eBay, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and so forth, spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year, okay, just in the power bill alone. Okay? So very large OpEx ticket for them, and typically they would say that's the largest OpEx item, so top of the list is the power bill. A big chunk of that is increasingly electronics required to interconnect these systems. It used to be that interconnects were basically power-free. In a sense, it was just a plain old strand of copper that you could use to interconnect racks to each other, right? But with the need to go faster and faster, as data rates have increased over time, people have moved to optical interconnect. And while that can certainly carry the data rates that are required in the data center, the problem with optical is that it consumes quite a bit of power. That is the case because the electronics is obviously electrical. You need to convert it to optical so you can send an optical signal down the optical fiber and then reverse the process on the other end, convert the optical wavelengths back to electronics. The process known as optoelectronic conversion is inherently power inefficient. That's just physics. It's about, at best, 30–40% efficiency. With Spectra7, we're able to keep the signal electrical in its native format and avoid the conversion to optical. It's a really big deal for data centers. So for example, if you look at the slide, at 100 gigabits per second, we're able to cut the power by a factor of 7. And as you move to 400 gigabits per second, we're able to cut the power dissipation from a range of 24–30 watts down to at most 3 watts. That's a 90% power reduction, which is enormous. For example, for one of our hyperscaler customers, they did the math and realized it would save them about $20 million a year. It's 20 $20 million a year in their power bill per data center alone. Okay? So it's an enormous savings. And this morning we had an important press release with Ixia, which is the industry-leading test and interoperability company, formally announcing that Spectra7 cables are now tested, fully interoperable with the infrastructure at 400 gigabits per second. It's a very important announcement. Some of you may have caught it this morning. We think this is a real inflection point for our business going forward. The other value proposition for us is much thinner cables. As I mentioned earlier, Spectra7 technology allows you to go at a higher data rate and go longer, but also over thinner cables. So on the left, you would see a typical cable bundle that's passive, that does not use Spectra7. We're able to cut the diameter, also known as the gauge of that cable, by a factor of 10. That's very important in a data center because typically these data centers are actually air-cooled. There's so much energy dissipation inside the data center that you have to push a high volume of air through the data center continuously. And when you have thin cables and thin bundles, that is much better airflow and therefore much better cooling for the data center. That's another very important value for us. Now, just to give you a snapshot of where we are with this business today, we announced the product about a year and a half ago, started sampling customers in Q2 of last year, and I've had orders coming in starting Q3 of last year through Q4, Q1, growing sequentially every single quarter. And we bring, again, a very important value prop to the data center. And we have announced 3 major interconnect customers. These are cabling manufacturers who use Spectra7 to enable active copper cables in the data center. These are public. These include Amphenol, the industry leader in connectors, Foxconn Interconnect Technology, and Luxe, which is a very large Chinese vendor. There are also 3 others that we have not named publicly, but hope to do so later this year. Our traction is increasing very strongly in the data center. And when we announced Q1 that we had 10 new customer designs in Q1 alone. It's a big quarter for us. And we saw that our prototype revenues in this segment tripled sequentially over Q4. So again, a big quarter for us. We expect high volume production in the end of 2018. Okay? So we remain on track in the data center. Now turning to our core VR, MR segment, I touched on this briefly at the beginning. This is sort of the roots of Spectra7. The first major design win for the company some 4 or 5 years ago was with Oculus, that is of course now part of Facebook. Since then we have continued to score, to my knowledge, literally every single tethered VR, AR, MR headset in the industry. This is just a sampling of the customers who are in production today with Spectra7 on the right-hand side of the slide. Every one of them, literally every one of them, uses Spectra7 for the active copper cables to connect to the host, a laptop, a desktop, whatever the host may be. And there are typically 3 devices per Spectra7 cable in this segment, and our total ASP is roughly on the order of $5 to $7 per unit. So per head-mounted display, that's the value we extract, between $5 and $7. And I should also mention that in the data center, it's about 2 to 3x that. So very significant increased value capture for us there as well. We expect that this market will continue to grow. It's hard to say if and when it's going to inflect, take off. People are expecting VR to become a very large market for a number of years. It continues to grow, fits and starts, I would say. This year was a particularly weak quarter for the VR market. There's a lot of device inventory at Amazon and so forth that plugged up the channel. They had to get burned off in Q1 this year. Looks like that process is done now, and backlog is growing in the VR segment. But long term, our expectations are this will continue to be a growth business for us, but it's not really where the company created greatest value. That place really being the data center segment for us. And we bring the value prop that I mentioned before. What you see on this particular slide is exactly an image or a picture of the bundle of cables that Oculus brought to us and said, can you please combine this to one cable using Spectra7 technology, which we did. And that's the cable you would see at Best Buy today or almost any retail outlet that you go to or over Amazon. That's the patented active copper cable technology that connects these VR displays to a host. And our technology is able to support very high resolution displays. Today these displays are around 2K. So 2K res per display, an aggregate of 4K. And our technology goes all the way up to 50 gigabits, that's 50, and supports up to 5K resolution per display, which is critical because your eyes are very close to the actual display, so you can see things like pixelation or other artifacts. So it's very important that the resolution in these VR devices be the highest that you can enable, and that's where Spectra7 comes in. So that's it for the presentation. Once again, to recap, we're very focused on a handful of very critical high-growth opportunities for us. The data center is doing very well, continuing to grow for us sequentially every quarter, expected to inflect by the end of this year. And we're happy to be partnered with some of the industry's leading interconnect suppliers. And we think blockchain will be an accelerator for the data center opportunity for us. And VR will continue to grow, though not necessarily at very high data rates. It will be probably a little bit lumpy over time. Finally, we're focused on getting to cash break even as soon as possible. And with Darren on the team, we're very operationally focused, and we'll continue to implement efficiency programs to get there as quickly as possible between cost and, of course, revenue growth. Thank you very much. I think we have all of 10 minutes for questions here, so we can open up the floor for questions. Please put your hand up if you have a question. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, great question. So, question is because we have prototype revenues, does that mean where are we in the development cycle and so forth? Yes, we are in testing and have in fact made a tremendous amount of progress on that front. That's why we refer to it as prototype. Sometimes we can think of it as pilots, pre-production as well. Well, yes, these are for what people call hyperscaler data center operators, which are very large data centers. That's a sweet spot for Spectra7. That's right. Decisions are being made right now. So far, our testing is coming along extremely well. Typically, there's about a 1.5 to 2 year gestation period, as it's often referred to, from the time you announce the product to when you actually go to production. We announced the product January of 2017. We started sampling Q2 of last year. So we're right on track. Welcome. Questions? Sure. Yes. So We're going to market first as sort of a plug-and-play compatible technology. So for existing servers and switches, there's no new design required, no forklift of the cabinets already in these data centers. So we're plug compatible. But over time, we do expect that next generation servers, the ones that use the next generation, for instance, Intel processor switches from switch vendors and so forth, will in fact reduce the power controller or power generation segment to take advantage of all the power reductions, certainly. But that's not inhibiting us. That's a future accelerator for the adoption. Thank you all. Have a good day.